Somewhere on Earth, a long time ago, a child opened their eyes for the first time. We don't know where it happened. We don't know what year. We don't know if the child was a girl or a boy. We don't know if the parents wept or pulled back or were too tired from the birth to look closely. What we know is this: every single human being alive at that moment, every parent, every elder, every ancestor reaching back tens of thousands of years, had brown eyes. They had always had brown eyes. Brown wasn't just the most common color humans came in, it was the only color. For as long as our species had existed, every newborn on every continent had opened their eyes into the same warm, dark color the parents recognized from their own reflection. And then, this one child was born, and the child's eyes were the color of a winter sky. Think about what that must have looked like, in a small group, by firelight, with no one in living memory having ever seen such a thing. There was no word for it. There was no category for it. There was only the strangeness of a face that should have been familiar, looking back wrong. Now, here is the part that I want you to sit with for a second. That one child, that one accidental birth, somewhere in Europe or Western Asia, in a community that left no name and no language we can read and no monument we can point to, that one child is the reason you might know somebody with blue eyes today. Not loosely, not poetically, literally. In 2008, a team at the University of Copenhagen, led by a quiet, careful geneticist named Hans Eiberg, did something deceptively simple. They collected DNA from blue-eyed people, from Denmark, from Turkey, from Jordan, people separated by language, by religion, by thousands of kilometers, by every visible measure of being unrelated strangers. They looked at a tiny stretch of DNA inside a gene called HERC2, a piece of code so small you could write it on the edge of a coin. And they found that every single blue-eyed person they tested had the exact same change in the exact same spot. Not similar, not closely related, identical. As if someone had quietly copied the same typo into hundreds of different books, in dozens of different languages, on different continents, and the typo had survived every translation. Eiberg said originally, we all had brown eyes. Something happened. Once, in one body, to one person. And then somehow, against every reasonable expectation, it spread. To understand why that's strange, you have to understand what almost always happens in genetics. The human body is built from about 3 billion letters of code. Every time those letters get copied, mistakes creep in. New mutations occur constantly. Most are harmless. Most change nothing. And most disappear within a single generation because the person who carried them either didn't have surviving children, or they did. But the rare letter got diluted into nothing. The math is brutal. A new mutation in a population of a few thousand people has almost no chance of lasting. It is a single drop of ink in a moving river. The river just keeps going. But this one drop did not dissolve. Somehow, this one tiny change traveled from one body to another body to another body, generation after generation, across thousands of years, across landscapes that turned from ice to forest to farmland, across populations that rose and fell and replaced each other, and burned each other's villages, and forgot each other's names. And it kept showing up. Same change, same spot, same eyes. By around 14,000 years ago, we know the mutation was already alive in northern Italy. There's a single tooth in a cave called Villa Bruna that proves it. The body it belonged to was a baby, roughly 17,000 years old, by the most recent readings of its DNA. A child who lived in the last shudders of the Ice Age, died young, and was buried with care by people whose names we will never recover. That baby had blue eyes, and every single blue-eyed person who has been born in the long 14,000 years since carries the same fingerprint as that child. That should land somewhere in your chest. Take a second with it. Let me tell you about the others we've found. In 2006, in the cold mountains of Leon in northern Spain, archaeologists working in a cave called La Brana Arentero pulled 2 skeletons out of the dirt. They had been waiting there for 7,000 years. The cave was high, cold, and remarkably steady in temperature. Those conditions had preserved the bone in a way that almost never happens. DNA, in most ancient burials, breaks apart into nothing. Here, somehow, it had survived. One of the bodies became known as La Brana I. For most of a century, anthropologists had assumed they already knew what someone like him would have looked like. He was European, after all. He had lived 7,000 years ago in what is now Spain. Textbooks said something close to this. By this time, Europeans were already pale, already adapting to weak northern sun, already starting to look like the Europeans in old portraits. The DNA disagreed. When researchers finally pulled the code out of La Brana I's tooth, and that tooth is real and still in a lab and still touchable, the results stopped people in the room. He had dark skin, genuinely dark, the kind of pigmentation the textbooks had said disappeared from Europe long before his lifetime. And he had blue eyes. Not the cliché. Not pale-skinned, blonde, blue-eyed Scandinavian. A hunter-gatherer with dark skin like his African ancestors, and eyes the color of a cold sky. And that combination, it turns out, was not unusual. It was the norm. When other Mesolithic burials in Europe started getting sequenced, in Hungary, in Luxembourg, in Germany, in England, the pattern held. Dark skin, dark hair, blue eyes, over and over and over. Whatever Europe looked like 10,000 years ago, it did not look like Europe now. If this is the kind of story that grabs you, the kind where everything you thought you knew gets quietly rearranged, hit the subscribe button. It's the only way the channel keeps finding people like you. I'm not going to ask twice. Let's keep going. Here is the part I keep coming back to. In 1903, in a place called Cheddar Gorge in southwest England, a workman improving a drainage tunnel inside a cave hit something he wasn't expecting. A skeleton, nearly complete, lying alone in the dirt. That skeleton was about 10,000 years old. The oldest, mostly intact modern human ever found in Britain. He came to be called Cheddar Man because of the gorge and because people had been giving names to caves long before they understood what was sleeping inside them. For most of the 20th century, museums and books showed reconstructions of Cheddar Man that looked like what people in Britain expected an old British ancestor to look like. Pale skin, reddish hair, a face you could imagine in any English village. In 2018, DNA from inside his ear bone was finally read. He had dark skin closer in tone to what you might see today in someone from sub-Saharan Africa than what you see in modern Somerset. He had tightly curled dark hair. He had died young, in his 20s, maybe through violence. There is damage to the skull that no one has ever fully explained. And his eyes were the same blue as the child in the Italian cave 4,000 years earlier. Same eyes, same switch, same single ancestor. The reconstruction artists redid him. The new face is unsettling the first time you see it because it doesn't match the story Britain told itself for 100 years. A man with deep brown skin and bright blue eyes looking out from a glass case in London. And then the strangest part. When researchers tested local DNA in Somerset to see if anyone in the area might be a distant relative of Cheddar Man's lineage, they actually found one. He was a history teacher. He lived less than a mile from where his ancient cousin had been buried. The teacher had inherited his ancestors' eye color through 10,000 years of births and deaths, through Roman invasions, through Viking raids, through plagues and famines and English winters, and 1,000 quiet hearths and 1,000 small love stories. The same eyes had been waiting in that cave for him. Now, widen this all the way out. Today, somewhere between 640 million and 800 million people are walking around the planet with blue eyes. Roughly 1 in every 11 or 12 humans alive. In Estonia and Finland, nearly 9 out of every 10 people are blue-eyed. In Iceland, 3 out of every 4. In huge regions of sub-Saharan Africa and East Asia, the trait is so rare that an individual blue-eyed person can be the only one in a village. And every single one of those people, every Estonian fisherman, every Icelandic child, every Argentine grandmother of German descent, every blue-eyed baby born this morning in a hospital somewhere in Ohio. Every one of them is carrying the same exact switch in the same exact place in their DNA. And every single one of those switches points back to the same person. Not a category, not a founding population, not a vaguely related group of individuals. One, single, human. A child who once lay in someone's arms. A child whose parents had brown eyes and probably didn't sleep that first night because something about their baby was different and they didn't have a way to explain it. A child whose face is gone, whose voice is gone, whose name was unknowable even at the time, whose grave, if there ever was a grave, has long since been crushed back into the earth by glaciers and floods and tectonic shifts and tree roots and millennia of indifferent rain. And if you have blue eyes, or if you love someone who has blue eyes, you are looking at that child every single time you look in the mirror. Here's what we still don't know. And honestly, this is the part that haunts me the most. We don't know why it spread. This isn't like light skin. Light skin had a reason. It helped people in cloudy northern places absorb enough sunlight to manufacture vitamin D. The body needed it. Natural selection had a clear argument. Blue eyes don't have one. They don't see better. They don't see worse. They don't shield against ultraviolet. They don't help you hunt. They don't help you survive a cold winter. As far as anyone has been able to demonstrate, they do nothing at all, biologically. A neutral mutation, doing nothing, should sit at 1 or 2% of a population forever, slowly drifting in some places, slowly fading in others, never breaking out. This one broke out. It went from one body to nearly 800 million bodies in a window of time that, in evolutionary terms, is almost instantaneous. A blink. A breath. Some scientists think it spread because people found it beautiful. That in a population where everyone had brown eyes, a child with blue eyes was striking, memorable, something a partner might choose, something worth keeping in the family line. Mate choice instead of survival. Aesthetic instead of advantage. That might be true. We can't prove it. But if it is true, it would mean something quietly devastating. That the reason hundreds of millions of people alive right now have blue eyes is because tens of thousands of years ago, somebody looked at somebody else and felt something they didn't know how to name and decided, in some inarticulate way, I want to be near this. And that decision repeated itself in countless small unrecorded moments, generation after generation, until the trait was woven into entire continents. The other possibility is just luck. Genetic drift. The dumb statistics of small populations. A few founding families happened to carry the mutation into new territories. Those families happened to have more surviving children than other families, for reasons that had nothing to do with eye color. The trait rode along by accident, like a small bird carried on the back of a herd of buffalo across a continent. That is also possible. And in a way, it might be even stranger than the first explanation, because it would mean we are all walking around with the fingerprint of one specific person, and the reason that fingerprint survived might be no reason at all, just chance, just the universe shuffling its deck. Either way, the math holds. Eiberg's careful phrase from the original paper, perfectly associated. The same mutation, the same spot. Every blue-eyed person on Earth. One door, opened once, 14,000 years ago or more, by a child who never knew what they were starting. Somewhere on Earth, a long time ago, a child opened their eyes for the first time. We still don't know where. We still don't know who. We don't know if the child was loved or feared or simply held a little closer for being strange. What we know is that the child grew up. The child had children. The children had children. And the thin, invisible thread of changed DNA passed quietly from one body into another, across cold valleys and warming forests, across the rise of farming and the rise of cities, and the rise and fall of every empire that has ever flagged a piece of ground. The thread is still moving. It was moving when a baby was placed in an Italian cave 17,000 years ago. It was moving when Labrana I was laid down in a Spanish mountain 7,000 years after that. It was moving when Cheddar Man was placed alone in his English gorge. It was moving when a Roman legionary looked up at a captive from the north. It was moving when a Viking ship cut through the gray water of the North Sea. It was moving when a farmer crossed an ocean and held his first grandchild in a new country. It was moving this morning when a baby somewhere on the other side of the world woke up. You will probably never know if you walked past one of their other descendants today. You probably did. Multiple times. In line at a store, on a train, on a screen. They might be a stranger you'll never speak to. They might be someone you already love. But here is the part that stays with me. That original child, the one without a name, the one whose face the earth has dissolved, never had any idea. They were just a baby. They couldn't have known their eyes were anything other than the eyes their parents had. They couldn't have known that 14,000 years later, half a continent of strangers would still be carrying their reflection through every airport and every wedding and every hospital room on the planet. They were just a person. And somehow, quietly, without fanfare, without history bothering to write any of it down, that single person walked through the world. And the world has been looking back through their eyes ever since.